Hi there. Thanks so much for joining me today for the latest episode of Impact Real Estate Investing. My guest today is Avra Jain, co-founder of the Vagabond Group. With a career path that has taken her from bond trading on Wall Street to developing properties along some of Miami's trendiest streets, Avra has earned a reputation for identifying the next it neighborhood. Her remake of the Vagabond Hotel on Biscayne Boulevard in the historic MiMo district of Miami changed the course of that neighborhood forever. Be sure to go to evepicker.com to find out more about Avra on the show notes page for this episode, and be sure to sign up for my newsletter so you can access information about impact real estate investing and get the latest news about the exciting projects on my crowdfunding platform, Small Change. Hi, Avra. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Thanks for having me.
Very nice to have you here. Yeah. I love this quote from your website, which says, "We operate from the perspective of storytellers, allowing history to take center stage and create a genuine sense of place." And I would really love you to tell us a little about what that means.
Well, that really has come from the work that we've done. We got there. I'd like to think that we're people that actually sort of do it, and then rather than talk about it. So I can say that actually came from the work that we're doing. My team is 3 architects, one of which has a master's in historic preservation. And so when we start a project or we do a project, the first thing that we do is we study the history of the community, of the buildings themselves, architecturally, culturally. And so we always sort of start from the story. And if there isn't a story, we don't do the project.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so we actually, that quote really came from how we really operate. That's a real reflection of the work we do.
So what sort of stories do you look for?
It varies. So in Miami, there's a historic strip from the 1950s and 60s called MiMo, which stands for Miami Mid-Century Modern. So there's a boulevard, Biscayne Boulevard, which used to be US 1. So if you were driving down post-World War II in your 57 Chevy and you were going to Miami, the Magic City, you would have driven on US 1 or Biscayne Boulevard. And there was a section that had these old 50s and 60s motels. And, with the big neon signs. And so we came up here. One of the larger projects that we did that we're known for is the preservation work. When we renovated the Vagabond Motel to Vagabond Boutique Hotel. And that was the tipping point for the historic boulevard. So we bought about 10. The neighborhood at the time was all drugs and prostitution. And, it would have been a neighborhood that you would have just driven right through with, the shades down next to the baby seats. But there was some spectacular, vintage mid-century architecture, which I know you're an architect, so you can appreciate.
Yeah, no, I took a look on your website. They are stunning.
Yeah, so these were buildings that were up for demolition.
Oh, wow.
And they were in disrepair. SWAT teams were coming in once a month to empty them out because of, the drugs and the things that were going on. And so we knew that in order to, and this was a neighborhood that used to be Main Street. Biscayne Boulevard used to be Main Street. If you couldn't afford to stay at the Eden Rock or the Fontainebleau, you would have stayed at the Vagabond. Same architect that did the very famous Delano Hotel on Miami Beach. So we knew what it once was. So it was about, bringing it back. There are other times when we actually build neighborhoods, right? We go into warehouse districts and create neighborhoods. This was a neighborhood that was.
Yes.
So all we had to do was, was bring it back. And there was actually some really affluent neighborhoods nearby and surrounding neighborhoods that were also original from the 1930s and 40s. So it was really a beautiful project to do, both architecturally and for what it did for the community. The thesis was, if we bought enough of these motels that were $20 an hour, $60 a night, the hotel that we bought next to Vagabond, in the lobby, the sign said no refunds after 5 minutes. And it originally said 10 minutes, and they whited it out or scratched it. That was the neighborhood. And so we bought 6 of these old motels. A couple of them were abandoned, and the rest of them we shut down. What happened was, we thought, is if you shut down where people were actually doing these bad things, could the neighborhood find itself again? And it did.
What gave you the courage to do that, and what sort of resistance did you feel for these projects?
Oh, no resistance. Oh my gosh. The city was like, the mayor of the river, when we opened the Vagabond, we had 900 people. Everybody, all the art, everybody. It was like a really big deal. This was,
I suppose I meant from the point of view of, because opening is easy, but what about the financing? I mean, how easy?
Yeah. I was going to say, we had no community resistance. In fact, people continually thank us and all the time. But the resistance, yeah, sure, financing, couldn't get any.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've done this enough times. So, in fact, even my traditional real estate investors, I had done a lot of adaptive reuse in New York City and other places, and a lot of my investors, which go all the way back, 25 years to New York City, even some of them were like, Avra, you've done a lot of crazy things, but they just could not get past the working girl on the corner. They couldn't get past it. They could not see the architecture. They couldn't see the history. They just couldn't see it. They couldn't believe that it would come back. And so in this particular case, a lot of the money for that particular project was myself and my partners, my spouse. I mean, we put up, I'd say 40, 50% of the money. So it was really a cash project. But we found some very clever financial opportunities. So I did my homework. I always tell people, part of real estate is doing your homework, understanding zoning, understanding the community, and doing the outreach, understanding building codes, a lot of homework. Well, I had done my homework, and I knew that had been an ordinance set up in 2010 where you could sell development rights for historic properties.
Ah.
So now in New York City, we knew that we could do this. We call them transferable development rights.
Right, I'm very familiar with them, yeah.
So in Miami, for this particular strip, because it was historic and they downzoned it, meaning they did a height restriction of 35 feet, they took away buildable rights for the property owners. In exchange for doing that, they offered the property owners the ability to sell those development rights. So floor area ratio, how
right, yeah,
how much you could build, and then later they adopted a policy that also allowed you to sell the density, like how many apartments you could build, the number of doors, we call it, right? So I was able to arbitrage that, and the value of the transferable development rights for the Vagabond was $3 million.
Wow.
And the purpose of those development rights and the ability to sell them is also to incentivize property owners to preserve and invest in the historic preservation of the property. So you can sell those rights, but you have to reinvest them into the property and meet historic guidelines.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal project. Actually, I think there's, even in order to get historic preservation to work, you really have to give people incentives because it's very expensive.
Yes.
For those of us that build, doing historic preservation, it's more expensive. It would have been cheaper for me to knock the building down and build it again than it was to actually preserve the existing Vagabond.
Right.
So you have to give you incentives. Otherwise, there's a reason why developers let those buildings go into disrepair. And
Because they're expensive, yeah. Historic tax credits help as well. I don't know if Florida has a state credit as well, but I've used those in the past and they certainly help to fill the gap, that's for sure.
yeah, we qualified. We nationally designated the Vagabond Hotel. We met those standards and got the federal tax credit. So we got 20% of our
Yes.
investment into the property. Yeah, every state's different. Every state's different. Every municipality is different.
This really took creative financing. And then since then, you said you bought 6 of them. And how did the financing change once you opened the Vagabond Hotel?
Well, once we opened the Vagabond, sold the development rights, we were able to, get banks to
Yes.
give us some financing. But most of the projects we did cash. We did cash and we financed after. It was just still, even now it's easy, but I took rents on the Biscayne Boulevard were $25. The Starbucks leases for me for $70 triple net. So now it's very easy to get financing, and the Boulevard has a lot of cachet, but it
It's
took
very
three
difficult. Yeah.
years.
I mean, this is
Yeah,
actually why I started Small Change because um, I, banks almost squash the creativity out of what needs to happen, the creativity and innovation out of what needs to happen in cities because you can't. They want to only finance what's been done before. So how do you tackle a place like this if you can't get financing and you don't have the cash?
yes, it's almost. I would say it's almost impossible. So you rely on friends and family. A lot of it's your own checkbook, but that's also the opportunity. Those are the properties that are also undervalued, right? The properties that trade that are most expensive are really a function of financing.
Yes.
Multifamily trades at a tight cap rate because is the darling with the lenders. Banks really, and part of it is the regulations.
Yes.
Banks have to fund based on cash flow,
Yes.
income producing properties. The
Yes.
regulations almost mandate it.
Yes.
So lending on land or lending on an abandoned building and for adaptive reuse, which is unfortunate because in a lot of the underserved communities, you need
That's exactly what you need. Yeah.
exactly what you need because these are buildings that need a lot of work. Of course, they're not income producing. Nobody should be living in them. And some people do live in properties like that and shouldn't be there. So the banking industry does not set up to be helpful.
Right.
What has happened, short of being able to fund yourself or have enough track record to attract funding, is that there's sort of a hybrid lending space now. It used to be you can only get bank financing or a bridge loan, or expense hard money loan, you call it, right, 13-14%, which makes projects also unfeasible. You give away all your profits and interest costs. But if there's hybrid money out there now that is more flexible, and you can get between 6 and 9% depending on the project and the sponsorship. We've been able to get hybrid money for projects like this, and it's really because of our track record.
Yeah.
And it's all personal guarantees, right? I have to own
Right.
personally on everything.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I signed my whole life
Yeah,
away.
not until the project's completed.
Yeah.
It's very hard for people to get into this business from the developer side.
Right.
I have 3 architects that work for me, and they didn't want to be in a firm, just as you guys would call being a CAD monkey, I think, where you're just drawing all day, right?
Yeah.
And so they
Yeah.
wanted to be developers. And so they came and worked with me, and they're learning development really is about money. So when you
Yes.
think about what does it take to be a developer? We're not licensed. Architects are licensed. Builders are licensed, right? Your electrician's licensed. Even the real estate agents are licensed. Developers are not licensed. You can call yourself a developer as long as you have a checkbook.
Yes. So what would you tell other women who want to be real estate developers?
You have to love it. Well, first of all, I'd ask, what does developer mean to you? So if I asked you, Ava, define developer, how would you define it?
Oh, well, for me, it's all about the buildings. I'm very passionate about buildings and places and using architecture to make better places. So, being a developer for me is the opportunity to really make some significant change through the money that I invest or put together to make buildings better.
And then there's a lot of people that would like to do that, right? So how do they do that,
Yes.
right? And I think there's a lot of people with vision, and so you need the money, right? And then you have to be able to execute.
Yes.
And so a lot of what goes right or wrong is in the execution. So you have the vision, but now it's the execution. You have how well do you budget, the quality of the work, the team that you can assemble, um, and
Right.
the surprises, right? I always say we're in the problem solving business, really, especially when we're doing
Right.
adaptive reuse or historic preservation. You have no idea what you're buying. We've gotten pretty good at it now, and I can tell you every time it's different. Um,
Oh, yeah, it's a challenge, but that's the fun of it. But listen, why, you're a female developer, I'm a female developer. There are very few of us. Why is that? Because, women are very good at team building and
well, I think a lot of women are doing it. They just don't have the title, right? So in my particular case, I'm the founder, you know, and I run the company. But a lot of women are doing it. They're just not, I think, the front person.
interesting.
You do your work, you're the front person, you're doing it. But the women that work for me, they all work, I empower them they all have their own projects within the Vagabond group. They all run their own jobs, they do the architecture, they do the expediting, of course, all under, and they've been with me long enough that at first, tightly under my watch, and now, call me if you need me.
Yeah, but still, it's a little bit different because they don't have access to their own money, and that's, I think, as you said, the deciding factor. So where I live, there's very few women who kind of can plan their own destiny as real estate developers. I actually don't know of anyone else at the moment. So
It's money. So that's it. It really defines it. But I will say there's a couple of other things. So, because people have asked me, why, why aren't there more? Well, one is money, and a lot of that money comes with track record. I wouldn't give a first time person developer money. I mean, you really have to have experience in order to gain that. So when I first did my first projects, it was mostly my money.
yes,
Want to lose somebody else's money while you're learning, right? So there's a learning curve here. And so as you learn and you have track record, you can get sponsorship. But you really have to have that, especially in what we do, right? So what you and I do, we find it's easy. Buying a multifamily, lipsticking it up, creating value. Okay, that's one thing. But to actually go in and create place, uh,
yes,
that's different, and that requires mostly cash investments. Uh, the returns usually reflect the risk; they always do. I mean, I don't,
yes.
people go, oh, I get two times my money, and people are happy getting two times their money in 4 to 5 years. I can tell you that would never be a deal on my desk. If I don't think I'm making 4 to 5 times equity in 5 years, I don't do the deal, which is why I'm able to get sponsorship. So part of it is discipline. There's a lot of projects I'd like to do, but I look at it and I go, I can't pencil it. And then those projects that I can't pencil, which is like affordable housing, I just do myself. And I'm okay that those don't make money. I'm okay that they may or may not make money because I'm doing those for different reasons. Those are for social reasons. But when I'm doing deals where I'm taking in investment money, the returns for the type of deals that we do, at least the perceived returns need to be much higher. But I do that for myself. A lot of this is my own money, and I treat everybody's money as if it's my own money.
Yes.
I also don't take fees. I'm not a fee developer. So I get paid based on success. So I don't take fees.
Okay. So you're right alongside equity investors who risk their money then.
Right alongside. So I don't make a penny until you make money. And I think that's part of the other way that I've been able to raise money. Now, not everybody can do that. That's not realistic for a lot of people, but I've been able to do that because I set myself up for that. I saved enough money. I don't want to get paid, which is why I've been able to get, the investment I get.
Right.
Because, people want to know that your interests are aligned. And there are a lot of developers out there. They're really in the fee business. They're in the fee business, period. And I don't think that makes us aligned.
So tell me a little bit more about the 50s motels that you're converting to affordable housing.
Yeah, so we did one in Little Haiti, not too far from the Vagabond. So if you couldn't afford to stay at the Eden or Rock, you would have stayed at the Vagabond. If you couldn't afford to stay at the Vagabond, you would have stayed at Superior Motel and Apartments, which is further west, and a 1950s. It's a more modest property. Some in some of the more modest neighborhoods, the historic properties are more modest, but it doesn't mean they're less important.
Yes.
And I bought the building to do affordable housing. The person that runs affordable housing for the county, Mr. Liu, he would say, he actually stalked me into doing this. He wanted to put a new face to affordable housing and the projects that were being done. So I started by giving him suggestions on what I would do and how I would go about it. And then he just asked me to do something, and I did. I can tell you that it was a horrible experience.
Oh, no.
Working under the administrative aspects of affordable housing, they wanted to give me a small surtax loan. It was a $500,000 surtax loan. And then by the time they were ready to give me the loan, I said, I don't even want it. It'll be the most expensive money I've ever gotten because I've spent $50,000 in administrative costs to get a $5 million loan, right? There was like a 10% cost. Every draw request was like the size of a Bible. I said,
Yeah, no, that's right.
I said, Mr. Liu, I can do the work, but I can't handle the administrative aspect of this. I wouldn't get a draw for, a draw request. I don't know how sophisticated everybody is on the podcast, so I'll try to be a little more descriptive. But every time you build a building and it's time and you have a loan, you do the work, you turn in your invoices, so to speak, and you're supposed to get reimbursed. Well,
quickly, right? Quickly is the idea because you need the money to keep going.
6 to 10 weeks.
Yes, I've been there.
So, which means that, and that if a guy doesn't get paid for 6 weeks, or if you weren't getting paid 6 weeks after you've done a job, you'd leave the job site. So
yeah, so it costs a lot of money and time because
So I ended up floating the entire job, meaning paying everybody myself and then getting reimbursed, 6, 12 months, 12 weeks later. And again, that's not feasible for most people. And that's why affordable housing doesn't work. And that's why when you drive around and you see these sort of half-completed buildings, is because you have to have the means in order to get through those projects. And I probably have $500,000 of my own money in the project, making zero return. So because the cost to do it right versus the rents that you should charge doesn't mean I can charge higher rents, but truly affordable rents. You cannot build affordable housing in Miami. If you gave me a piece of dirt and said, Avra, build affordable housing at 80% of the average income, I would tell you I couldn't do it.
You can't do it anywhere, actually.
Right.
You can't do it anywhere in the world, I don't think. So, maybe some places, but it's a...
Right, so it has to be subsidized.
Standard problem.
Subsidized, yeah. So you have to get grants. So the reason why we were able to do historic preservation was because of the entitlement programs, to sell entitlements. That allowed us to sort of grant ourselves the monies to do these, what I call public benefit projects, historic preservation, public benefit. And you're saving time, you're saving moments in time, right? And then same thing with affordable housing. You cannot do affordable housing without subsidies and grants. It's impossible. So those are instances, and people think, oh, well, you can get financing for it, or people will do impact investing, all those things.
No, you can't.
The banks have to lend to the same criteria, whether it's a public benefit or not.
Yeah.
It's not to say they don't want to, but they can't.
Yeah, so nonprofits become very important in this equation. It's very difficult. How successful has that motel been, and have you built other ones that are affordable? Do you have a waiting list?
Oh yeah, well that project, it's called, it was a motel and efficiency apartments. So it's all apartments, most of them efficiency apartments, very successful, 100% occupied. When you can charge and we were able to lease to more high risk candidates, maybe people who've had a felon in their past, not a violent crime or something, but
Right.
we're able to lease to people and not take security deposits. And a lot of our employees, one of the reasons why we started to do some affordable housing when we opened the motel or the hotel, Vagabond Hotel, because we realized our staff were taking 2 or 3 buses to get to work, and they were single moms. So we actually started subsidizing housing for our employees early on. We bought an apartment building close by, and then we realized that obviously this was not just a Vagabond issue. This was a national, well, certainly a local, certainly a national issue. So that started our efforts in affordable housing, was sort of subsidizing for our existing employees. And then when we did the other ones, we're very conscious about trying to fill the void. And we can do that because it's a personal investment. We're not a large institution doing affordable housing leasing. This is not a money maker. I think there's a way to do it where you could get, people go, well, can you do impact investing and get a 5 or 6% return? We can, because I don't take developer fees.
Right.
And we self-perform a lot of the work. So I'm able to do that. So on the project I did after this, I took in 2 small investors who wanted to participate in impact investing. So we did one in Little Haiti, and then we did our next project in Overtown, 44 units in Overtown, and we're in the process of renovating that. Also a 1950s, late 50s, so it's a combination of preservation and affordable housing, which we think is important. Affordable housing is not bricks and mortar. It's about people and the qualities of their life and how they feel about themselves. I always say we're really in the self-esteem business. How does a single mother feel in her house, the stress level, knowing if her kids are in a healthy environment or not in a healthy environment. The project we just in the process of doing is we finished 2 of 5 buildings so far. We keep everybody on site and we rotate them. So nobody leaves the property. They're not relocated. So people their lives are not disrupted. They stay where the kids go to school, where they went to school. Their friends are still, they're friends. They go to the same church, So we think it's important when you do affordable housing to keep communities intact. That's one of our prerequisites. Even when we did the property in Little Haiti, we did 2 units at a time and rotated people. So they did not have to move.
Right.
So in the building we just finished, in one of the buildings, it was a single mom, and her child was having a lot of health issues, and DCF was going to take the child away because they didn't think that the mother was giving the child the asthma medication and everything, because the child was suffering. And the minute we moved her from the apartment that she was in to one of the new apartments, the child was fine.
Wow.
She almost lost her child because of the housing, the quality of the housing she was living in.
That's pretty shocking.
It's shocking. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Yeah. I mean, so most of the buildings all these buildings that we bought in Overtown, I mean, they should be condemned buildings. I mean, I'm surprised people didn't, apparently they had. Some people fallen from the 2nd floor into the 1st floor. I mean, but people live in those conditions because they can't afford higher rents and they don't want to move. These tend to be closer to core locations, right? They're older buildings, closer to where they work. It's where their communities are. And they don't want the landlords to fix up the apartments, because if they do, they know they have to raise the rent, and then they get kicked out. Right. So people choose to live in these really, subhuman conditions because they can't afford the rent if it was renovated. So on that particular project, we teamed up with the CRA, the Community Redevelopment Agency in the area. And because they had seen our work in Little Haiti, they had asked us to do a similar project in Overtown. And my response was, no. I said, it doesn't work. I go, it doesn't work. I can't afford to subsidize all these projects. So I said, I told them what they needed to do. One, they have to remove all the administrative. No good developer would operate under those administrative restrictions. And two, I said, you're going to have to pay for it. And if you want the rents truly affordable, you're going to have to pay for all of it. Because if you want a $700 rent, I need to be in that unit for $70,000. And by the way, it costs $82,000 to buy the apartment, and it's going to cost you another $50,000 a unit
to renovate it. Yeah.
So if you want me to do it, and I'm not going to wait, I'm not going to take draws, you're going to have to give me $500,000 every time I start a building, because I'm not going to chase you down. I'll do open book, come anytime you want, knock yourself out, but I can't do the work and meet all the typical requirements. So, they said, Avra, yes, do it.
Wow.
Went all the way to commission. Commissioners voted on it, and I did the project. So, they basically bought down the rents, and people are living in 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, beautiful 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. When I say beautiful, you're an architect. I floated the walls. I did resilient channels for the wall board, so that for sound, it's wool between. Everything's copper piping. I rebuilt from the inside out. If you walked in, you would have fallen through the studs on the floor, and you would have seen the roof two ceilings up. So totally rebuilt. Wow. With all the right quality materials. Everything mold resistant. Impact glass safety, all those things. So people are living in really beautiful apartments. And so think about what that's like for them as people, right? The pride, how their kids feel to come home to work, the family gatherings. Remember, we don't build buildings, right? You build buildings, but it's really the quality of the experience in the building. It's how people feel. Otherwise, right. Buildings can be nice to look at, right? Right? Mm-hmm. What are they really? Buildings to me, they're made of organic materials. Buildings live. And as builders and developers, we have to, we feel that. We think about that. Some people, so lots of times I get to a building and it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't have the life. And our job is when we do these projects, these adaptive reuses and these historic preservation projects, whether it's for, an adaptive reuse or for affordable housing, you have to think of it as, how do people live? How are people going to feel when they're there, when they're inside? And that's sort of how we operate.
That's how it drives you. So these projects, I know we've talked about them a lot, and they're clearly your passion projects. You also work on very, very big projects.
Yeah, so that I can afford to do the passion projects.
Yes, that's the bread and butter work, right?
So, and those, are more traditional, I do, by the way, they're very good local community banks here that I work with, and we were very fortunate during COVID and everything that, my friends that had the large banks, had a lot of trouble having them work with them and work with their tenants. But the community banks in Miami really stepped up and were the first to say, what can we do? How can we help? So I have good local banking relations, banks that have lent to me for 20, 25 years that support my projects, even if they're slightly out of the box. They again, track record, they support the project. So I'm able to do I'm getting ready to do a large adaptive reuse project, 250,000 square feet of adaptive reuse in a warehouse district. There might have been a day where I wouldn't get financing, but I will get financing for that, 50% loan to cost, and then I'll have the capital stack of my own investors. Then, on some bigger projects, I'm getting ready to do a project on the Miami River. That's a big project. It's a new build, 259 apartments, 200,000 square feet of office and retail. It'll be almost a $180 million project with a $120 million loan. I'm partnering with a very large developer, Property Market Group, PMG. They build really well. I'm really excited to have a chance to work with them. There are developers that you respect, and then there's other developers that you would really like to work with, and this is one of them, and they're both. And so they build beautifully. So we're teaming up. They're going to do the residential portion, and I'm going to keep the office and retail. Without them, they're providing the completion guarantee. I mean, I wouldn't have the balance sheet. We're talking financing here, right? I wouldn't have the balance sheet to guarantee a $120 million construction loan.
Right.
So, so that's very limiting to do big projects. Probably, I don't do, one reason why I don't do a lot of big projects is because of the financing. It's just by the time you bring in the capital stack and everything, and then when you do that, you give up a lot of control over the integrity of the project. People start value engineering everything out of the project. And so,
yes,
the vision gets lost, and all of a sudden it's work and it's not fun. It's one reason why I don't do a lot of large projects. So, whereas on the smaller projects, we can keep control.
Yeah.
So yes, I am doing a large project because it's a spectacular site with a spectacular vision. But I don't do that as often. The risks are high, and the loss, I think more than anything, is the loss of the vision, loss of control. When you do big projects, I always say you have to have two things when you partner with people. You have to have the same vision, but you also have to have the same values. Some people can have the same vision, but if they don't have the same values, it's not the same. So lots of times that happens when you do these sort of bigger projects.
Yeah, I've always stuck with smaller projects for much the same reason, because I can finish them the way I think they should be finished, and no one's egging me on to do something different.
Everybody wants you to cut corners. Hey, it's already sold. Hey, it's already leased. Then who cares? If it's a 10-year paint or a 15-year paint. Well, I care.
Yes. Yep, I'm with you.
Those decisions that get made, again, the more people that are involved. For developers that cut those corners, it's short-sighted, because then why do they come and lease my building instead of their building? Well, because people can feel the difference. They can feel the difference of quality. Do. So, it's interesting right now in this market and during COVID, and people are consolidating and deciding which offices to keep or which ones not to keep or which neighborhoods to be in or not be in. And I can tell you I have two very large tenants that had offices across the city, and they chose to consolidate, and both of them chose to be in my buildings and give up other spaces. And it really is because of the quality of our buildings, the uniqueness of our buildings. It speaks to their brand. And this was a time when spending the money and having your building be special, having there be a story to the building and the neighborhood that it's in mattered.
Yeah.
Because lots of times you can't spreadsheet this stuff. Everybody in the financing world wants, a spreadsheet, right? Well, let's do a spreadsheet, right? Well, you can't spreadsheet the quality of a space. You can't spreadsheet cool and placemaking. There's no spreadsheeting that. But when there's stress in the market and you see how people move and what they choose to keep and where they live, or where rents are more stable or whatever, you see the performance. But when I'm doing a spreadsheet and presenting it to a bank, there's no way to quantify that.
Yeah. Just shifting gears a little bit, are there any current trends in real estate development, especially around the pandemic, that you think are most important for the future of our cities?
Well, we're staying the course. I mean, our mindfulness, our thoughtfulness, it hasn't changed. If it's before the pandemic, it's during the pandemic, it'll be after the pandemic. So we've always practiced sustainability. Even in our new building, everybody's talking about these new air filtration systems and water systems. We had already designed that into our building before COVID. So, it was like we were already there. We already felt like the wellness trend we already got on that bus a while ago. Now tenants are going to be asking about it and insisting on it. But we were already on that bandwagon. My team is architects, and so we are always looking at what's new, what's cutting edge, and hopefully somewhat cost affordable. So we're adopting a lot of those. So I think those things will become more mainstream now, which is good,
Yes.
and maybe that will even make them more cost effective. So we haven't changed. Again, our mindset has always been, when you do adaptive reusing, you use existing buildings. I mean, that's the ultimate in sustainability, right?
Yes, I agree.
It's like thrift shopping, right? The best thing, people don't realize how many CO2s go into building a building, and you knock it down, you spend more CO2s, and then you rebuild it and spend more CO2s. There was a really great study out there, and I don't know if you've read it, on green building. And it was put out actually by the historic preservation community. But if you were to take a building and knock it down, build it back using let's say green technologies, all the new green technologies, sustainability, LEED certified, whatever, it would take you 80 years to make up for
Yes.
the damage done. 80 years to make up for the fact that you knocked down a building. So we think, so we are all about keeping existing buildings. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, we do it, we don't stop and think, oh my God, we're saving the environment, right? But we know that it's important to the sustainability story, but we also know that it's important to the cultural story, to the story of community and social resiliency. When people talk about resiliency, but they talk about it like, well, how high is your seawall or whatever. Resiliency, by definition, is your ability to bounce back. It does not say how high is your seawall. It is your ability to bounce back. And that is a social response, not a building response, not a civil engineering response. So we think that we think that focus, that part of social resiliency is part of keeping community, and part of keeping community is to try to save and do adaptive reuse with existing buildings. Again, we're back to why we build our business around the story. We think without the story, it isn't going to get us, we won't be interested. And it's got to be a story that, when you do projects that have a story, people want to be a part of it. People want to be a part of it. People want to work on it. People want to help build it. And then people want to live in it. And people want to do their business in it. I think developers underestimate the market. And
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think they underestimate them. They know the difference, and they know how it feels. And if they have a choice to spend $1 here or $1 there, they're going to spend it where it also feels good. And our projects feel good.
Yeah. So one last question for you, and that is, what's your big, hairy goal?
Gosh, I guess just, I'm living it every day.
That's a great
Yeah,
answer.
just, we just keep doing what we're doing. And I think, we talk about, always wanting to learn, right? And knowledge is empowering, but it doesn't give you power unless you use it. So we are, we're big at, I'm always learning, always curious. We're always helpful to other developers, very transparent. We open source. So if you go on, I think you've been on our website, if you go on to vagabondgroupconsulting.com and you hit open source, we open sourced our affordable housing project. out all the money we spent, all the inspections, all the time, all the materials, everything. The things that went well, the things that didn't go well. I think that one of the goals would be to hopefully encourage more developers, especially people in the public benefit space, anybody taking public dollars for sure, to open source their projects so more people can learn, and so that more thoughtful developers can hopefully be successful.
Great idea.
Yeah.
I'm definitely taking a look, and I'm super jealous of all the fabulous 50s motels that you're renovating. It's a fabulous
question for you. So how in your platform can you help developers like me?
Well, if you want to start raising money from a broader group of people, from the community, that's really what investment crowdfunding is about. And I see it as, how can I say this? I landed in Pittsburgh unexpectedly. And one of the really big things I learned here is that people really want to be involved with their community and making it better with their city. It doesn't really matter where you go. People are very connected to the place they live in. And I was working with dollars that dried up in the late 2000s and started thinking about crowdfunding to replace them. Also working with banks that became more and more skittish and wanted to do less and less innovative project lending. And so all of that kind of led me to investment crowdfunding, which really lets the crowd decide. So you could, very soon, you'll be able to raise, there's actually upgrades to the rules underway, but very soon an issuer or developer would be able to raise up to $5 million a year from anyone over the age of 18.
Wow, no subscription agreement, no.
No, there's subscription agreements, but we handle all of that electronically online. So if you go to a funding portal like Small Change, we are registered with the SEC and members of FINRA, and it's a very heavily regulated rule. We kind of manage all of that. And you basically create a disclosure packet, which we help you create, register it with the SEC, and then everything else is handled electronically as people invest. So I think the most meaningful thing for me is that if you want to bring along people in your community who normally don't have a chance to invest and create wealth based on what's happening in their own community, this is a way to do that.
So I think it's a great idea. I actually went on your webpage and I thought about it. So in the affordable housing project that we did in Overtown, we actually, one of the partners, because we were getting this large grant, they basically assigned us a local CDC, a community organization.
Right, Development Corporation, yeah.
Yeah, to be part of the ownership. And it was Mount Zion, which was actually the oldest church in Miami, I think. They're a part owner, less than 10%, so the lender has no issues. And I was first reluctant, and again, it was more a control thing. It wasn't a money thing because we're not making money, right? So,
right, but they can bring grants to the table that you can't as a for-profit developer, right?
By the way, the reason why I don't put myself in the non-for-profit space is because I see a lot of the people in the non-for-profit space, and it's not non-for-profit. Okay, it's actually I'm in the no-profit space. So I won't put on a non-for-profit space because everybody pays themselves salaries and things. We don't pay ourselves. So,
that's right.
So so the CDC came in and they've been great because they help. And that was the thing. I said, well, as long as everybody understands nobody's getting paid, I'm happy to have a community organization. And I said, so they have ownership. So certainly down the line, we have a 30-year covenant. Down the line, there will be some value there. But I thought that it would have been great if even instead of the CDC or in addition to the CDC, what if everybody in the community, so I get a grant from the CRA, what if every family that lived in that community all got a piece of the project instead of the CDC? So,
yeah, I've thought about this a lot. I've actually thought that In a poor community, wouldn't it be fantastic if there were even a foundation that matched investments made, or to increase the value to people who invest, maybe even $100?
Yeah, we got a $3 million grant, just so you know. But I mean, the $3 million grant, and you'll like to see the math in our open source. The $3 million grant will save the residents $8 million in rental costs over the 30 years. So
Yes.
it's a huge benefit to the tenants with
Yes.
subsidized rents. But if everybody in the community was given, let's say, $1,000 ownership, assigned $1,000 ownership, right? I mean,
Yes.
as long as I don't have to deal with 1,000 investors, I'm happy to have them own a piece of the project. As long as
Right.
as me as developer, I can do what I do. So anytime there's a grant made into a project, why isn't that grant, which is community dollars, taxpayer dollars, and why not have that grant be a crowdfund investment?
Well, it can be. I just think people aren't quite there
Well,
yet.
let's do it.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I've thought about raising a pot of funds for a community, for example, where maybe you partner with a community development financial institution or community bank, and someone manages the money, but it's programmatically distributed in the community as well. So now you have maybe not just your project improving the community, but you're benefiting other people directly. Let's just say you're below a certain income and you need your roof replaced. You can get a loan for 0%.
Miami does a lot of that. I have to say, there's a lot of things we do. America Build does that. They have the $20,000 grants. If people know where to look, that is made available.
I know, but I'm thinking really community specific, You pick a community that you're working in, you kind of really try to build it up and make sure that people who are not wealthy in that community come along for the ride when developers do make investments and the community is improved. So, I mean, it could happen in any number of ways, but we all think about what happens to people who are left behind, right? So there's something there. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like precisely, but I have tools in my toolkit, these SEC regulations that I understand very well, that could be deployed in that manner. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's something there, and I think so. And I don't know. We should talk about that, because I'd like to. I'd like to
Absolutely.
explore that. I think there's the political will to do it in Miami. I think there's enough. Again, the thing is if we do one, right? If we do one project and it works, it becomes the model.
Yes, absolutely.
So our case study, the one that we did for Vagabond Group Consulting, the open source, has become sort of a case study for, I get calls from all over the country, people from the
Yeah, that's very important.
and that's what we
Yeah.
need to solve some of these problems. We need the transparency. We need to have conversations like you and I are having, and we all need to share and figure out best practices. And we need to find a solution. And it's in the developer's best interest that we find these solutions. I try to challenge some of my big developer friends and say, listen, guys, we need to be part of the solution here, because this is really becomes our problem. You don't think it becomes your problem, but it does, because if the restaurant in your building, even if you don't want to do it for all the right reasons, you should understand how it affects you. Because if the restaurant in your building can't find employees because there's no place for them to live, they're having that problem on Miami Beach. They're having trouble hiring people because nobody can afford to live on Miami Beach. I said, so that affects your ability to rent your space. I mean, so I've tried to encourage that, show them even financially why this is in their best interest.
Right.
That we all don't do well unless we all do well, right? So,
Right.
but how do we incentivize developers to do that? There needs to be policies in place for that as well. In Miami, we have something where developers can write a check, like you're building a building and you write a check towards public benefits. Well, make the developer build the do the public benefit. Don't, sometimes writing a check is
Yeah.
easier than doing the work.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I'm going to be in touch soon. But we should wrap up, and I really enjoyed talking to you, Avra.
Yeah, this has been fun. I look forward to seeing your work. So you have to send me some of your work. We'll have
I will.
to share some stories.
Thank you. Absolutely. That was Avra Jain, a wildly creative Miami developer. Avra and the Vagabond Group have built projects that range from converting a 100,000 square foot warehouse to luxury loft condominiums in New York's Tribeca neighborhood, to the remake of the Vagabond from motel to hotel on Biscayne Boulevard. But Avra's passion lies squarely with the personal project portfolio she is building, the conversion of abandoned and historic motels into reimagined, affordable housing communities. She's leveraging her past success to tackle both the restoration of significant architecture and the making of affordable housing in a very unique way. You can find out more about impact real estate investing and access the show notes for today's episode at my website, evepicker.com. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter to find out more about how to make money in real estate while building better cities. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today, and thank you, Avra, for sharing your thoughts. We'll talk again soon, but for now, this is Eve Picker signing off to go make some change.